Please, somebody help me. He's going to hurt my mommy. The words hit the diner like a thunderclap. 7 bikers, men most people cross the street to avoid, froze mid-sentence as a barefoot little girl burst through the door, eyes wild, dress torn, chest heaving like she'd been running for her life. Because she had been. Slow down, sweetheart. Who? Where? The parking lot. He has her pinned. He said he's going to finish it. Richard felt those 2 words land somewhere deep. Finish it. He'd heard those words before. In a different parking lot. A different woman. A night he'd spent 15 years trying to outrun. He hadn't moved fast enough then. 7 bikers stood up at once. What they found in that parking lot would change everything. For Sarah, for Lily, and for every man who walked through that door that morning. Because sometimes the people the world fears most are exactly the ones a little girl needs. And sometimes, just sometimes, showing up is enough to save a life. What happened next left the entire town speechless. Richard was the kind of man who made good first impressions. He showed up to Sarah's apartment with groceries the 3rd time they met. Fixed her leaking kitchen faucet without being asked. Remember that Lily likes strawberry juice, not orange. The neighbors on her floor noticed him and nodded. Her co-workers at the diner said he seemed solid. Dependable. The kind of man a single mother deserved after everything she'd been through. For the first few months, Sarah almost believed them. He paid the electric bill when things got tight in November. Drove Lily to school in the morning. Sarah's shift started early. He laughed loud, smiled easily, and always held the door open, always, without fail, when someone was watching. That last part took Sarah a while to notice. By month 3, he was checking her phone. Casually at first. Glancing at the screen when a notification came through, then asking who it was before she could answer. By month 5, the questions followed her to work. Who were you talking to on your break? Why did it take you 40 minutes to drive home? Why does that coworker text you so late? She started explaining herself before he even asked. That's when the criticism moved in quietly, the way cold air does, through the smallest gaps. Her parenting was too soft. Her hours were too long. She let Lily watch too much television. She laughed too easily around the wrong people. Nothing was ever said once. Everything was said repeatedly, in that low, measured tone that made her feel like she was the unreasonable one for being bothered by it. Lily noticed before Sarah admitted it to herself. 7-year-olds don't have the words for control, but they feel the temperature of a room. They watch how their mother's shoulders change when a certain car pulls into the driveway. They learn to be quiet when they were never quiet before. By month 8, Sarah wasn't living with a partner. She was managing a threat. And the morning everything changed, the morning that would bring 7 strangers into their lives and permanently alter the course of what came next, that morning had already begun the night before. Lily was 7. But she understood more than anyone gave her credit for. She couldn't explain it in words, not the kind adults used. She didn't know what control meant, or manipulation, or the slow erosion of a person's confidence over time. But she knew this. Richard's voice sounded different depending on who was in the room. Around other people, it was warm. Easy. The kind of voice that made grown-ups laugh and relax their shoulders. But when the door closed and it was just the 3 of them, something shifted. Not loudly. That was the thing nobody would have believed. It wasn't shouting, not at first. It was the quiet version. The low, flat tone that meant Sarah needed to choose her next words very carefully. Lily started watching her mother's face instead of the television. She noticed the way Sarah laughed differently around Richard. Shorter. More careful. Like she was checking the laugh against something before letting it out. She noticed how her mother apologized for things that didn't seem like mistakes, The wrong brand of juice, a 10-minute delay, a phone call that ran long. Small things. The kind adults brush past. But they added up, and Lily kept a running count without knowing she was doing it. She noticed when her mother stopped singing in the kitchen. Sarah used to hum while she cooked. Old songs, half-remembered, slightly off-key. Lily had grown up with that sound as background to everything safe and ordinary. Somewhere around month 5 it stopped. Sarah still cooked. She just did it quietly now, with one eye on the clock. Lily began sleeping with her shoes on. Not every night. Just the nights Richard's car was in the lot and the air in the apartment felt different, heavier, like the stillness before a storm. She'd lie on top of her covers, sneakers laced, listening to the walls. Ready. She didn't know ready for what exactly. She just knew her body had made a decision her mind hadn't caught up to yet. She was 7 years old and she was already making exit plans. She didn't have a plan. She just knew, if something happened, she had to run. Where she would run, she hadn't figured out yet. Sunday morning came in quietly. Too quietly. Sarah had made her decision the night before. She'd lain awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the words until they stopped shaking. 8 months was long enough. She knew what this was now. She knew where it was heading. And she knew that every day she waited was another day Lily spent sleeping in her shoes. She chose the diner parking lot deliberately. Public enough to feel safe. Familiar enough to feel steady. Her shift started in an hour. There would be people around. She told herself that mattered. It didn't matter the way she thought it would. Richard pulled in at 9:47. She was already there, Lily quiet in the backseat with a coloring book she hadn't opened. He got in the passenger side, and before Sarah could find the first word, he looked at her with that flat, knowing expression, the one that meant he already knew. She told him it was over. The first 2 minutes were almost calm. He asked questions in that low, measured tone. She answered carefully. She kept her voice steady. She told herself this was going fine. She told herself she'd planned for this. Then his hand closed around her wrist. Not a grab. Worse than a grab. Slow. Deliberate. The kind of grip that says I decide when this ends. She tried to pull back. He tightened his hold. She said his name once, firmly, the way you speak to something dangerous. He said nothing. Then his free hand moved. The slap wasn't loud. But in the silence of that car it was deafening. Lily didn't scream. She made a sound, small, sharp, involuntary, and then went completely still the way children do when their body understands something their mind is still catching up to. Richard turned toward the back seat. And in that half-second while his attention shifted, Sarah turned too. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. Calm in the way that only pure adrenaline produces. 2 words. Just 2. Go. Run. Lily's hand found the door handle. The lock clicked. The door swung open. And a 7-year-old in a torn dress ran barefoot across the parking lot toward the only lit building she could see. They'd been riding since 6. A charity run for a veterans shelter 2 towns over. 40 miles of early morning highway, engines loud, air cold, the kind of ride that clears whatever the week left behind. By 9:30 they were at their usual table at the far end of the diner, the big one near the window that the staff kept open for them on Sunday mornings without being asked. 7 men. Eggs, coffee, hot sauce on the table before they sat down. The easy, unhurried rhythm of men who'd known each other long enough to sit in comfortable silence. They were loud when they wanted to be. But this morning was quiet. Good quiet. The kind that comes after something meaningful. Derek Cole sat at the head of the table. Nobody had voted on that. Nobody had announced it. It had just settled that way over time, the way true things do. He wasn't the biggest man there. Wasn't the loudest. He was the one who, when something needed to be said it once and didn't repeat himself. The one who listened to everything before responding to anything. The men around him had served in different branches, different decades, different corners of the world, but they all recognized the same thing in him. The particular stillness of someone who had been in enough situations to stop being impressed by noise. When Derek spoke, the table listened. When Derek was quiet, the table waited. He was working on his second coffee when someone made a joke about the ride and the table broke into laughter. Genuine, easy, the laughter of men who had earned a slow Sunday morning. The plates were half finished. Cups were being refilled. Outside, the parking lot sat ordinary and still in the late morning light. None of them were looking for trouble that morning. None of them had any reason to expect it. None of them knew that 50 feet away, in a grey sedan with the engine still running, a woman was trying to survive the next 60 seconds. None of them knew any of it. And then the door opened. And 7 men turned around at the exact same time. Nobody moved for a full second. Not because they were frozen. Because the room had just changed and everyone in it felt it simultaneously. The waitress behind the counter, the couple by the window, the cook visible through the kitchen pass-through. A barefoot little girl in a torn dress standing in the middle of a Sunday morning diner. Chest heaving, eyes searching the room for something safe to land on. She found Derek. He was already moving before he decided to. Chair back, one knee on the floor, down to her level in a single unhurried motion. His voice came out low and even, the way you speak when you need someone to feel the ground beneath their feet. Hey. I've got you. What's your name? Lily. Okay, Lily. Where is your mama right now? The parking lot. The grey car. He won't let her out and he said, she stopped. Swallowed hard. Pushed through it. He said he's going to finish it. The table went silent. Not the comfortable silence from 5 minutes ago. Something else entirely. The words finished moving through those 7 men like a current, and each one of them heard it through a different memory, a different deployment, a different doorway, a different moment when those words meant exactly what they sounded like. Derek didn't react visibly. That was the thing. He held Lily's gaze for one more second, made sure she felt steady, then slowly stood up. He set his coffee cup down on the table. Carefully. Like he was setting something else down with it. He said nothing for 3 full seconds. Then he buttoned the top button of his jacket. The 6 men around him were already standing. No signal was given. No order issued. They simply rose, the way men do when the decision has already been made and the only thing left is to move. They filed toward the door in silence. No rushing, no urgency in their steps, just the terrible, purposeful calm of people who have walked toward bad situations before and know that running changes nothing except your breathing. They didn't run to that parking lot. They walked. And somehow, that was worse. Outside, Richard saw them coming. And his hand moved slowly toward the inside of his jacket. Richard was still talking when they reached him. That was the first thing. He hadn't stopped. Even with 7 men walking toward him across an empty parking lot, he kept his hand on Sarah's arm and his voice at that low, controlled pitch. Still performing, still managing the scene the way he always managed scenes. He was the kind of man who believed that confidence could outlast any situation if he just held it long enough. He smiled when they stopped a few feet away. Gentlemen, I don't know what she told you, but this is a private conversation. Nobody responded. They simply stood there. 7 men in a loose half-circle, engines off, hands visible, saying absolutely nothing. That silence was its own language and Richard didn't speak it. He tried again. This is none of your business. Derek spoke then. Unhurried. Flat. It became our business when a child ran for help. Richard's smile tightened at the edges. He released Sarah's arm, not because he was done, but because he was recalculating. He straightened his jacket, looked Derek up and down the way men do when they're deciding whether someone is serious. You don't know what's going on here. You don't know who I am. You're the man, Derek said, who put fear in that little girl's voice. Something moved across Richard's face, gone as fast as it came. He turned back to Sarah, one last attempt to reassert the dynamic that had worked for 8 months in private. His hand shot out and shoved her shoulder. Hard. He never got a second chance. One of the bikers stepped between them before the motion had finished. No grab. No threat. Just a body placed deliberately in the space Richard needed to reach her. An immovable fact. Richard looked up at the man and found nothing in his expression worth negotiating with. Then Richard reached into his jacket. The temperature of the lot dropped 10 degrees in 1 second. He pulled out his phone. I already called my brother. Nobody moved. Nobody flinched. And then, from somewhere on the other side of the building, a siren. Then 2. Real ones. Derek's expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes settled. Because it turned out the 911 call had already been made, from inside the diner, the moment Lily walked through the door, before any of them had even stood up from the table. The moment the officers stepped out of their vehicles, Richard changed. It was seamless. Practiced. The hand that had shoved Sarah 30 seconds ago was now open, relaxed, gesturing calmly as he moved toward the police with the easy confidence of a man who had nothing to hide. His voice shifted register entirely, warmer now, concerned, slightly breathless, like a man who had been the victim of a misunderstanding and was relieved help had finally arrived. He told them Sarah had been erratic, emotional, that she'd swung at him first and he'd simply tried to restrain her. That these men, he gestured toward the bikers, had interfered in a private domestic situation based on the confused account of a 7-year-old child. He said it all smoothly, coherently, with just enough detail to sound credible. It took less than 4 minutes to come apart. Lily spoke first. She didn't wait to be asked. She walked up to the nearest officer, looked directly at him, and said quietly, "He always gets mad when Mommy says no." Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just a child reporting what she had observed, with the devastating clarity that only comes from having watched something long enough to understand it completely. One officer checked the car door. The child lock on the rear left door was engaged from the inside. Lily hadn't opened it from the outside. She'd unlocked it herself, from within a sealed car, because her mother had told her to run. Sarah's wrist told its own story. The bruising was already visible, the particular pattern that comes from a grip, not a fall. Then the record surfaced. 2 prior domestic disturbance calls in another county. Different woman. Same pattern. The brother Richard had promised never arrived. What arrived instead was the weight of documentation, the kind that doesn't negotiate and doesn't forget. They cuffed him by the rear of the sedan. He looked back once, jaw tight, and his voice came out raw and stripped of the performance entirely. "You're ruining my life." Derek looked at him evenly. "No," he said. "You did that." They put Richard in the back of the patrol car and closed the door. But there was still one thing nobody had anticipated. Something Lily said, quietly, to one of the officers, just before they finished taking statements. Nobody in that parking lot expected it. The parking lot slowly emptied of urgency. The patrol car pulled out. Statements were wrapped up. The small crowd that had gathered at the diner entrance drifted back inside in 1s and 2s, the way people do when the crisis has passed and ordinary life reasserts itself. The morning light had shifted, warmer now, less sharp, and the grey sedan sat quiet and still where it had always been, looking like nothing more than a car. Sarah found Lily standing near the diner entrance, arms wrapped around herself, watching everything with those careful, observant eyes that had seen too much for 7 years. She crossed the lot and knelt down and pulled her daughter in without saying anything first. Just held her. Lily's arms came up slowly and then tightened, and for a long moment neither of them moved. When Sarah finally pulled back, her voice broke on the first word. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry you had to see that. I'm so sorry I didn't." "Mama." Lily said it the way children sometimes do, with a steadiness that stops adults mid-sentence. "I wasn't scared of him." Sarah went quiet. "I was scared nobody would help." The words landed softly, but they rearranged everything they touched. 8 months of fear, of careful management, of teaching herself to make peace with a dangerous situation. And what had broken her daughter's heart wasn't the danger itself. It was the possibility of being invisible inside it. Derek had heard it from a few feet away. He walked over slowly and lowered himself to one knee, the same way he had inside the diner, unhurried, deliberate, at her level. He looked at Lily for a moment before speaking. "You did the right thing today," he said. "You ran toward people. Always do that. Run toward people, not away." Lily studied him with those serious eyes. Then nodded once, like she was filing it somewhere permanent. One of the bikers' wives had arrived by then. She'd seen the group's location shared and driven straight over. She touched Sarah's shoulder gently and said she wasn't going anywhere for a while. An officer handed Sarah a card with numbers for protective order resources and a victim's advocate. Justice was already in motion. The hard part, the part that had lived in that car for 8 months, was finally over. They didn't make a production of leaving. That was the thing about these men. They hadn't arrived with fanfare and they weren't going to leave with it either. Jackets were straightened. Helmets picked up from where they'd been set down. A few words exchanged quietly among themselves. Nothing dramatic, nothing that needed to be said loudly. Just men wrapping up a morning that had gone a direction none of them had planned for, and returning to the ordinary business of living. One by one the engine started. That sound, low, rolling, reverberating off the diner walls and across the empty lot, had probably frightened people in other parking lots, in other towns. The kind of sound that made certain people lock their car doors without thinking. But right now, to Sarah, standing near the diner entrance with her daughter at her side and a coffee someone had pressed into her hands, it sounded like something else entirely. Derek was walking toward his bike when he heard the small, quick footsteps behind him. He turned. Lily had crossed the lot at a run, bare feet on warm asphalt, and stopped just in front of him. She looked up with those wide, serious eyes that had already seen and survived more than most adults gave her credit for. She'd been thinking about something. You could tell. The way she stood, chin slightly up, shoulders back, she'd made a decision to ask it. "Are you superheroes?" Derek looked at her for a moment. Something moved through his expression, not quite a smile, but close. The closest thing to soft that a face like his could produce. "No," he said quietly. "Just men who don't ignore screams." Lily held his gaze for one more second. Then she nodded, that same single, deliberate nod, like she was marking it down somewhere inside herself for keeps. Derek put on his helmet. 7 engines rolled out of that parking lot in a single unhurried line, and the sound faded slowly down the Sunday morning road until it was gone. Sarah stood in the quiet they left behind, her daughter's hand in hers. And sometimes, the loudest engines answer the quietest cries.
If this story moved you, hit that like button, because some stories deserve to be heard by more people. Subscribe for more moments like this one. And drop a comment below. What hit you hardest? Lily sleeping with her shoes on? Or the moment she said, "I wasn't scared of him"? I was scared nobody would help. Tell me. I read every single one. See you in the next one.